Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash. Karen Holloway screamed this as her white BMW X5 barreled toward my pregnant heifers. She thought because she drove a luxury SUV and ran the homeowners association for the new beige subdivision next door, she owned my land. She was about to learn that in Texas, the deed is king, and I was about to spend $52,000 on concrete just to watch her life fall apart. And honestly, it was worth every single penny. The dust her tires kicked up tasted like disrespect. It settled on the leaves of the old oaks that lined my driveway, a driveway my great-grandfather had carved out of this very land back in 1940. It settled on the coats of my Angus cattle, the finest herd in the county, animals I'd raised from calves. My family had worked this 50-acre spread, the Broken Spur Ranch, for 4 generations. We'd survived droughts, floods, and the Great Depression. I wasn't about to let some peroxide blonde tyrant in a German car be the thing that broke us. I was standing by the fence line, checking a loose post, when she first came tearing down my private road. The road wasn't paved, just hard-packed dirt and gravel that ran a half-mile from the county blacktop to my homestead. It also happened to cut a straight line, saving a good 3 miles for anyone trying to get to the new estates at Willow Creek that had sprung up like a fungal infection on the horizon. The developers had tried to buy an easement from me a few years back. I'd told them, politely, to pound sand. The road was for my ranch, my equipment, and my family. Period. This Karen Holloway, she was the president of their HOA and apparently their lead real estate agent. The first time she drove through, she didn't even slow down. Just a cloud of dust and the glint of sunlight off her silver-tinted windows. I figured it was a one-time mistake. The next day it happened again. This time, I was on my tractor, moving a hay bale. I flagged her down. She rolled her window down about 3 inches, just enough to let her voice out and keep the country air out of her precious car. "Mom," I said, tipping my hat. It's how my daddy taught me to address a lady, even one who was actively trespassing. "This here is a private drive. The entrance to your community is back on the main road." She gave me a look that could curdle milk. It was a practiced look, one that said, "You are an inconvenience I am currently tolerating." "I'm aware," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But this is so much more direct. It's a community easement." I felt a slow burn start in my gut. "No, Mom, it is not. It's private property. See the sign?" I pointed to the weathered but clear sign at the entrance. Broken Spur Ranch, private drive, no trespassing. She actually scoffed. "Oh, that old thing. Listen," she said, leaning forward, as if sharing a secret with a particularly dim-witted child. "We're all neighbors here. We need to have a little synergy. I'm selling multi-million-dollar homes back there. My clients expect a certain level of convenience. Your clients can be as convenient as they want on their own property," I said, my voice losing its polite edge. "This is my property. Don't use my road again." I turned my back and walked away, the signal for conversation over. I heard her mutter something that sounded a lot like hillbilly before she peeled out, spitting gravel against my tractor's tires. My wife, Sarah, saw the whole thing from the porch. She had a glass of sweet tea waiting for me when I got back to the house. She's a school teacher in town, sharp as a tack and with a spine made of pure Texas steel. She worries, but she doesn't scare. "That's the one they were talking about at the school," she said, handing me the glass. "Brenda Holloway, or Karen, as the kids have nicknamed her. Apparently, she tried to get the school to change its mascot because it wasn't brand-aligned with the new community." "Sounds about right," I grumbled, taking a long drink. The cold tea did little to cool the fire in my chest. "She thinks my driveway is a community amenity." "What are you going to do, Jake?" Sarah asked, her hand resting on my arm. "Remind her what a lock is for," I said. The next morning, I was up before the sun, as always. I drove the ATV down to the entrance and stretched a heavy-duty chain between the 2 main gate posts and snapped a thick padlock on it. It wasn't pretty, but it sent a clear message. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Let her synergize her way around that. That satisfaction lasted exactly 1 day. I went to town for feed and came back to find the chain lying in the dirt, cut clean through with a pair of bolt cutters. The padlock was gone, and there, in the dust, were the distinct, arrogant tracks of her BMW X5. She hadn't just trespassed, she'd committed property destruction. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was a declaration of war. I went to the hardware store and bought the thickest, most case-hardened chain they sold, the kind they use for logging. I bought a padlock that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. I drove new steel posts into the ground on either side of the gate and welded the chain to one of them. The only way through now was with the key or a cutting torch. I also mounted a new, much larger sign. In big red block letters, it read, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This means you, Karen Holloway." I knew it was provocative, but I was past caring. Sarah just looked at it, looked at me, and said, "All right then." She knew that look in my eye. It was the same look my grandfather got when the bank tried to foreclose in '48. It was the look of a man who had been pushed to his limit and was now pushing back with the force of a tectonic plate. A week of blessed quiet followed. I saw her BMW a few times, slowing at the end of my road, a dark shape behind the wheel, hesitating before speeding off toward the proper entrance to her plastic kingdom. I started to think, maybe, just maybe she'd gotten the message, I should have known better. Tyrants don't learn. They just regroup. The real crisis, the moment that turned this from a property dispute into a blood feud, happened on a Tuesday. I was moving a herd of my pregnant heifers from the north pasture to the south one, closer to the barn. It's a slow, careful process. These weren't just cattle, they were the future of my ranch. My prize Angus line, carefully bred for generations. One of them, a beautiful girl I called Daisy May, was carrying a calf from a prize bull. That calf alone was worth upwards of $15,000 before it even hit the ground. The herd was crossing the driveway, slow and calm, when I heard it. The high-pitched whine of an engine being pushed too hard. It was her. The white BMW came flying around the bend, doing at least 50 on my gravel road. She saw the cows, and instead of slowing down, she laid on the horn. A long, blaring, obnoxious shriek that shattered the afternoon peace. Cattle are prey animals. A sudden, loud noise like that sends them into a panic. The herd scattered, a black wave of pure fear. They bolted in every direction. It was chaos. And that's when I heard the sickening sound of snapping wire and a low, pained bellow. Daisy May, in her blind panic, had run straight into a section of barbed wire fence. She was tangled, bleeding, and screaming a sound of pure agony. That's when the hook opening scene happened. I ran toward her, my heart pounding in my ears. Holloway slammed on her brakes, her car skidding to a stop just feet from the terrified animals. She rolled down her window, her face a mask of fury, not concern. "Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash," she shrieked, as if they were the inconvenience, not her reckless driving. I didn't even look at her. All my focus was on Daisy May. I had my wire cutters off my belt and was trying to free her, speaking in a low, calm voice, trying to soothe her as blood matted her black coat. She was breathing in ragged gasps, her eyes wide with pain and terror. I finally got her free, but the damage was done. Her leg was badly gashed, and worse, I could see the telltale signs of premature labor starting. Only then did I turn to face the woman in the car. I walked slowly, deliberately, toward her idling BMW. My hands were covered in my animal's blood. I probably looked like something out of a horror movie, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of actual fear in her eyes. She started to roll up her window. I was too fast. I slammed my bloody hand flat against the glass, leaving a perfect crimson print. "Get off my land," I said, my voice a low growl I didn't recognize as my own. "This is your last warning. There will not be another." She didn't say a word. She just threw the car into reverse and tore back down the road, leaving me in a cloud of dust and despair. I spent the next 6 hours with the vet, Doc Evans. He managed to stitch up Daisy May's leg and, by some miracle of modern veterinary science and a whole lot of drugs, stop the premature labor. But it was touch and go. "She might lose the calf, Jake," Doc Evans said, wiping his brow. "And even if she doesn't, her show career is over. That leg will never be perfect." The vet bill was $2,000. The potential loss of the calf was $15,000. The damage to my prize-winning heifer was incalculable. When I finally stumbled back into the house, covered in dirt, blood, and antiseptic, Sarah was waiting. She didn't need to ask what happened. She just held me. After a long moment, she pulled back and looked me square in the eye. "You're planning something," she said. It wasn't a question. "Good." The next morning, I didn't bother with chains. I took the welder and a 4-foot section of I-beam and welded it directly to the steel gate posts. The gate was now a permanent, immovable fixture. There would be no more driving through. I took pictures of the cut chain, the tire tracks, and got a written statement from Doc Evans about the cause of Daisy May's injuries. I was done with warnings. The time for being a good neighbor was over. Now, it was time for the paper war to begin. I had no idea then just how deep and dirty it was about to get, or that her next move would be to try and use the law itself as a weapon against me. She was betting her entire fraudulent enterprise on breaking me, and I was about to call her bluff with steel-reinforced concrete. The process server found me mending the very fence Daisy May had crashed into. He was a young kid, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and he handed me the envelope with an apology in his eyes. "Sorry, Mr. McCoy." I just nodded and took it. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The letterhead was from a fancy law firm in the city, the kind with names separated by ampersands and a view of the skyline. Inside was a lawsuit. Karen Holloway, on behalf of the Estates at Willow Creek Homeowners Association, was suing me. The words jumped off the page, each one a little spark of fuel on the fire in my gut. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, private nuisance, and the real kicker, unlawful obstruction of a public and necessary easement. She was claiming my private ranch road, the one my family had used exclusively for 80 years, was a public thoroughfare, and that my welded gate was an illegal blockade. I laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. She was actually trying to steal my land with paperwork. I walked back to the house, the papers clutched in my hand. Sarah read them over my shoulder, her expression hardening with every line. "An easement. Jake, there's no easement. Your grandfather fought the county on that in the 70s and won." "I know," I said, my mind already churning. "But she's betting I don't, or that I can't prove it. She thinks she can bury me in legal fees until I give up." "So what's the plan?" Sarah asked, her hand finding mine. "The plan," I said, "is a trip to the county seat and a call to Tom Callahan." Tom Callahan was a lawyer of the old school. His office smelled of stale cigar smoke and justice. He wore boots with his suits and had a reputation for shredding arrogant city lawyers and spitting them out like tobacco juice. He hated HOAs with a biblical passion. When I laid the lawsuit on his desk, he read it, pushed his glasses up on his forehead, and let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be," he said, a slow grin spreading across his face. "She's not just bold, she's stupid. That's my favorite kind of opponent. An easement, on the old McCoy spread. Her lawyer must be fresh out of law school." "Can she win, Tom?" I asked. "With this, not a chance in hell, provided we have the paperwork. But she can make it hurt. She can drag this out, file motions, bury us in discovery. It'll cost you." "How much?" To make it go away? 10, 15 grand maybe. To fight it, countersue for damages to your heifer, and make her publicly regret the day she ever learned your name. Could be 20, 30. I didn't hesitate. I want her to regret it. Tom's grin widened. That's what I like to hear. First things first, Jake. I need the deed, the original survey, everything you've got. That's my next stop, I said. The county clerk's office was a time capsule. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and dust. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on rows and rows of massive, leather-bound plat books. I knew what I was looking for. My grandfather had been a meticulous man. He kept copies of everything, but I wanted the official record. I wanted the county's own ink on the page. For 3 hours, I sat at a heavy oak table, carefully turning brittle pages. I traced the history of my land back, parcel by parcel. I saw the signature of my great-grandfather, clear as day, on the original deed from 1940. And then I found it. The master plat map from 1972, the year the county tried to claim a utility easement right where my driveway was. Tucked into the record was the judgment from the ensuing court case. McCoy versus Williamson County. The court had ruled unequivocally that the road was, and always had been, private, with no existing easements, prescriptive or otherwise. It was a slam dunk. I paid the clerk for certified copies of everything. The deed, the survey, the court ruling. Holding those papers felt better than holding a winning lottery ticket. It was the truth, codified and stamped. Armed with my arsenal of paper, I went back to Tom's office. He spread the documents out on his desk like a general planning a battle. He let out a satisfied grunt. Oh, this is beautiful, Jake. This isn't just a defense. It's a cannon. We're not just going to get this dismissed. We're going to countersue for fraudulent litigation and every penny you've spent, including Doc Evans' bill and the value of that calf. But Karen Halloway wasn't the type to wait for the courts. While our lawyers were exchanging politely hostile letters, she escalated. The first black government SUV that rolled up my drive belonged to the Environmental Protection Agency. The agent was a young man, professional, but clearly uncomfortable. Mr. McCoy, we received an anonymous complaint, he said, avoiding my eyes. Allegations of improper manure storage and runoff into Willow Creek. Willow Creek bordered the back of my property. It also fed into the pond that was the centerpiece of her tacky development. I knew exactly who had made the call. A complaint, huh? From a concerned citizen, I asked. Yes, sir, I do need to conduct an inspection. Be my guest, I said, swinging my arm out in a grand gesture. Tour of the whole place. I've got nothing to hide. For the next 2 hours, I walked him through my entire operation. I showed him my manure management system, a composting setup that exceeded every state and federal guideline. I showed him the grassy buffer zones I maintained around the creek, specifically to prevent runoff. I showed him my water test results, which I conduct voluntarily twice a year. The agent grew more and more relaxed. He saw a ranch that was not just compliant, but pristine. Mr. McCoy, he said at the end, shaking his head. This is one of the cleanest operations I've seen. I'm sorry to have wasted your time. This complaint is baseless. I know, I said, and I know who made it. Thanks for being professional about it. He nodded, a look of understanding on his face. We get these kinds of calls sometimes when new developments pop up next to agricultural land. People who don't understand how a farm works. Oh, she understands, I said. This isn't about misunderstanding. It's about harassment. He left, and I was left with the simmering rage of having to prove my innocence against a phantom accusation. A week later, it was the county health department. Another anonymous tip. This time, my well was supposedly leaching contaminants into the subdivision's water table. It was absurd. The geology of the area made it physically impossible. But again, I had to let the inspector come out, take samples, and waste half my day. And again the results came back perfectly clean. The inspector even told me my water quality was better than the municipal supply. Karen was trying to bleed me out, not just with legal fees, but with 1,000 paper cuts, a death by bureaucracy. She wanted to make owning my ranch so inconvenient, so miserable, that I would just give in and give her what she wanted. Every failed inspection, every baseless claim, just hardened my resolve. But her next move was the one that truly showed her character. She went public. I was cleaning my rifle one evening when Sarah called me into the living room. "Jake, you need to see this." There she was, on the local evening news. Karen Holloway, standing in front of my welded gate, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. Her hair was perfect, her expression a masterclass in feigned victimhood. "He's a menace," she said to the reporter, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. "This road is the only direct access for emergency services to our community of over 50 families. What if there's a fire? What if someone has a heart attack? This man, this rancher," she said the word like it was a slur, "is holding our safety hostage, all out of spite." The camera panned to my hand-painted sign with her name on it. The reporter's voiceover was grave. "A classic case of old ways versus new growth. But one resident's property rights may be putting an entire community at risk." I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by white-hot fury. She was painting me as a monster, a villain who would let children burn just to prove a point. She was lying, of course. Her subdivision had a brand new, wide-paved road leading directly to the county highway. It was the only designated emergency access route. My dirt track was not, and had never been, on any county emergency plan. "That lying witch," I spat, my hands clenched into fists. Sarah put her hand on my shoulder. "They didn't even talk to you. They didn't get your side of the story." "Of course not," I said bitterly. "Her story is better television, crying victim versus angry redneck." The news story was the talk of the town. People I'd known my whole life looked at me differently at the feed store. I could hear them whispering. I was no longer Jake McCoy, a fourth-generation rancher. I was the guy from the news who was blocking the ambulances. The smear campaign was working. The stress was immense. But it was in that moment, watching her lie so brazenly to the entire county, that my plan began to shift. It wasn't enough to win in court. It wasn't enough to prove her wrong. I had to dismantle her, publicly and completely. I needed a weapon she couldn't counter, something that would not only stop her, but expose her. And that's when the final piece of the puzzle fell into my lap, delivered by the most unlikely of sources. Eddie the mailman. Eddie had been delivering mail on this route for 30 years. He was a fixture, a quiet, observant man who saw everything. One afternoon he pulled his little white truck up to my mailbox as I was fixing the latch. He handed me my mail, but then he hesitated, looking over his shoulder as if to make sure no one was listening. He leaned in closer over the fence. "Mr. McCoy," he whispered, his voice low. "That Holloway woman, she's in deep." "What do you mean, Eddie?" "I see the mail, you know," he said, a little sheepishly. "Can't help it. Red letters. Past due notices from every credit card company there is. Letters from a law firm in Houston. Looks like a messy divorce. She's drowning in debt." This was interesting, but not the bombshell. Then he delivered it. But that ain't the half of it. I was delivering a certified package to her the other day. Had to get a signature. She was on her porch, on the phone with a client, one of the new buyers. She was shouting, didn't even see me walk up. I heard her plain as day. Eddie leaned in even closer. "She's promising them access," he whispered. "She's not just telling them the road is a shortcut. She's putting it in the contracts. Selling your road as a deeded ranch amenity." She said, and I quote, "Of course it's guaranteed. It's part of the luxury lifestyle package." That was it. The world went silent. All the noise, the anger, the frustration, it all focused into a single, sharp point of clarity. This wasn't just trespassing or harassment or a frivolous lawsuit. This was fraud, Wire fraud, mail fraud, real estate fraud. She wasn't just betting on winning a lawsuit, she was actively selling property rights she didn't own, cashing checks based on a lie. Her entire financial survival depended on taking my road. If she couldn't deliver that guaranteed access, every one of those contracts would be void. She'd be open to lawsuits from all her buyers, and she was already drowning in debt. That's when I knew I had her. She had built her entire house of cards on my land, and I was about to pull the foundation out from under it. I thanked Eddie, who just nodded and tipped his cap. He knew he'd just handed me a loaded gun. As he drove away, I looked from my welded gate to the beige rooftops of her fraudulent kingdom. The paper war was about to end. The construction phase was about to begin. I wasn't just going to build a barrier. I was going to build a monument to her failure. You know, there comes a point in a man's life when he's pushed so far that the normal rules of engagement just don't apply anymore. When someone is actively trying to ruin your livelihood, slander your name, and commit fraud using your property as the bait, you stop thinking about fences and start thinking about fortresses. That's the moment I decided to build the wall. And if you've ever dealt with an entitled neighbor or a corrupt HOA that thinks they own the ground you walk on, you know exactly the feeling I'm talking about. So if you're enjoying watching this house of cards get ready to tumble, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, because you're going to want to see how this ends. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, ordering enough concrete to build a bunker. The first call I made was to a man known simply as Big Mike. Big Mike was a contractor who looked like he was carved out of a mountain. He had hands like cinder blocks and a reputation for building things that could survive the apocalypse. He mostly did commercial foundations and agricultural structures. More importantly, he had a deep-seated hatred for entitled city folk who moved to the country and tried to change it. I got him on his cell. Mike, it's Jake McCoy. Jake, how's the herd? Heard you had some trouble with that new HOA queen. He boomed, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. That's what I'm calling about, Mike. I'm done with trouble. I need you to build me something. A barn, a shed, what you need? A wall, I said. There was a pause. A wall. A big one. 12 feet high, 100 feet long. Steel reinforced concrete. I want it right across the start of my driveway, where it meets the county road. There was a longer pause, followed by a deep, guttural laugh that sounded like it came from the center of the earth. A wall. By God, Jake, you ain't messing around. You want to stop her, or you want to make a statement? Both, I said. I want it to be so permanent, so absolute, that archaeologists will find it in 1,000 years and wonder what kind of God we were trying to keep out. He laughed again. I love it. When do you want to start? Here's the thing, Mike. She's having a big open house weekend. The weekend after next. She's got banners up all over town. I want the concrete trucks rolling in at dawn that Friday, and I want that wall finished by sundown on Saturday. During her open house? Oh, that's just poetry, Jake. Pure concrete poetry. It's going to cost you, though. A rush job like that, the materials, you're looking at 50 grand, easy. I've got it, I said, thinking of the cattle fund I'd been building for years. It was for a rainy day. Well, it was pouring. Just tell me one thing, Mike. Can you build it so nothing, and I mean nothing, gets through it? Jake, he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. When I'm done, even a tank ain't getting through this. My next trip was back to the county offices, but not to the clerk's records this time. I went to the permits and planning department. I knew if I filed for a fence permit, Halloway's lawyers would have it tied up in injunctions before the ink was dry. But my lawyer, Tom, had given me a brilliant piece of advice. I sat down with a planner named Dave, a guy I knew from the Rotary Club. Dave, I need a permit, I started. Let me guess, a fence, he said, a knowing look on his face. The whole town knew about my feud. Nope, I said, sliding the application across the desk. I need a permit for an agricultural security barrier. Dave blinked, picked up the form, and read it. Agricultural security barrier, to protect high-value livestock from vehicular threats and unauthorized access. He looked up at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. That's a new one. It's a real classification, I said, quoting what Tom had told me. Falls under farm infrastructure, not residential fencing. Different code, different approval process. My prize-winning Angus herd is a significant agricultural asset, and recent events, I said, tapping a copy of Doc Evans' report, have demonstrated a clear and present danger from reckless drivers. Dave read the report. He looked at the pictures of Daisy May's injuries. He looked at the lawsuit Halloway had filed. He looked back at me. The code is the code, Jake. Your land is zoned agricultural. The asset is legitimate. The threat is documented. The proposed structure meets the requirements for a security barrier. He picked up a rubber stamp, inked it with a satisfying thump, and stamped my application. Approved. Good luck with your barrier, Jake. The week leading up to the construction was the calm before the storm. Karen Halloway was smug, confident. Her story on the news had turned some of the public opinion in her favor. She probably thought I was hunkered down, licking my wounds, getting ready to surrender. She had no idea that a convoy of heavy machinery was being staged just out of sight, ready to descend on her perfect open house weekend. Friday morning, the sun wasn't even a rumor on the horizon when the first truck arrived. It wasn't a concrete truck. It was a massive excavator. Big Mike was there himself, chewing on a piece of jerky, a wide grin on his face. Morning, Jake. Ready to make some noise? The noise started with the excavator's bucket tearing a 2-foot-wide, 5-foot-deep trench across the entire 100-foot span, where my driveway used to meet the world. Then came the rebar crew. They built a cage of half-inch steel that looked strong enough to hold back the ocean. It was a work of art, a skeleton of pure defiance. The first concrete truck arrived at 7 a.m., just as the sun was clearing the trees. Then another, and another. A parade of them, all day long. The sound of the trucks, the shouting of the men, the roar of the pump engine, it was a symphony of progress. It was around 9 a.m. when she showed up. Karen Halloway's white BMW skidded to a halt on the county road. She jumped out, her face pale with disbelief, then quickly turning a blotchy, furious red. She was dressed for her open house in a crisp white pantsuit, which seemed like a poor choice for the war zone she'd just stumbled into. "What is this? What are you doing?" she shrieked over the noise of the concrete pump. I walked over to the edge of the construction site, staying on my side of the property line. I just smiled and pointed to the big permit sign Big Mike had posted. "Building an agricultural security barrier," I yelled back. "Fully permitted." "You can't do this. I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you into oblivion." Her voice was cracking. "You already are suing me," I reminded her. "And feel free to call the sheriff. I've got my paperwork handy." She did. She stood there, screaming into her phone. 20 minutes later, a county sheriff's deputy pulled up. Deputy Miller, a good man I'd known for years. He got out of his car, looking tired. He knew this was going to be a headache. "Jake, what in the world is going on here?" he asked. Karen ran up to him. "Officer, thank God. This man is illegally blocking the road. He's a menace. Arrest him." I calmly walked over and handed Deputy Miller a folder. Inside was a certified copy of my deed, the 1972 court order, and my freshly approved permit for the barrier. He read through them slowly and carefully. He handed them back to me. He turned to Karen. "Mom, according to these documents, this is Mr. McCoy's private property. He has a valid permit for this construction. There's nothing illegal happening here. This is a civil matter." "A civil matter? He's building a fortress. My open house is today. I have clients coming from the city. This is ruining everything." "I'm sorry, Mom, but my hands are tied. He's within his rights," the deputy said, already backing toward his car. "I suggest you talk to your lawyer." He got in his cruiser and drove away, leaving her standing in the dust, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. She screamed until she was hoarse. She screamed at me. She screamed at Big Mike's crew, who completely ignored her. She screamed at the sky. It was glorious. Finally, she got back in her BMW and sped off, tires squealing. I knew it wasn't over. Desperate people do desperate things. I was right. The next morning, Saturday, the day of her main open house event, she escalated from shrieking to outright lunacy. The wall was now about 8 feet high, the concrete still curing inside the wooden forms. The main entrance was completely and irrevocably blocked. But I have another gate, a simple farm gate a quarter-mile down the road that I only use for moving equipment between pastures. It was chained and locked, of course. Around 10 a.m., one of Big Mike's crew came running over. "Jake, you gotta see this." He pointed down the road. I looked just in time to see Karen's white BMW turn off the pavement and line up with my farm gate. There were 2 other cars parked behind her on the road. Her prospective buyers, no doubt, getting a front row seat to her meltdown. "She's not," I whispered. Oh yes, she was. She revved the engine, the sound echoing across the quiet fields. Then she floored it. The BMW shot forward and slammed into the 16-foot steel gate. There was a gut-wrenching crunch of metal on metal. The gate, which was set with 6-foot deep concrete posts, bent, but didn't break. The front end of her luxury SUV, however, crumpled like a tin can. The hood buckled, the grille shattered, and steam began to pour from the radiator. The car was totaled. She sat there for a second, stunned, the airbag dust settling around her. Then she started laying on the horn, a pathetic, wheezing bleat from her dying car. She had just destroyed her own $30,000 vehicle in a fit of impotent rage. And the best part, my trail camera, perfectly positioned to monitor that gate for wandering cattle, had captured the entire beautiful, idiotic act in glorious high-definition video. It was the cherry on top of the evidence sundae I was building. By Saturday evening, Big Mike's crew was taking down the forms. What they revealed was a masterpiece. A sheer, brutalist slab of grey concrete. It was 12 feet high, 100 feet long, and 2 feet thick. It was awesome in the truest sense of the word. It radiated permanence. It was a physical manifestation of the word no. I stood there, just looking at it as the sun went down. Sarah came and stood beside me, a thermos of coffee in her hand. She just stared at the wall for a long time. $52,000, she said softly. $52,467 to be exact, I said. Paid in cash. She turned to me, a slow smile spreading across her face. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The war was done. The physical battle was over, but the war was far from won. Now it was time for the final act, the public takedown. With the video of her ramming my gate, the affidavits from her defrauded buyers that Tom had been collecting, and the mountain of other evidence, I was ready to bring her house of cards down not just on her, but in front of the whole world. The county fair was next week, and I was planning on entering a new exhibit. The complete financial and social ruin of Karen Holloway. The week between the completion of the wall and the county fair was a blur of preparation. While Karen Holloway was presumably dealing with her insurance company and a very angry ex-husband whose money she was clearly wasting, my lawyer and I were assembling our kill package. Tom Callahan was a maestro of legal warfare. He had been quietly contacting the people who had put offers on the homes in the estates at Willow Creek. He'd found 3 families who had already closed and 2 more in escrow. He presented them, one by one, with a copy of my deed, the 1972 court ruling, and a simple, undeniable fact. The deeded ranch amenity and guaranteed private access their real estate agent Karen Holloway had sold them was a complete fabrication. It did not exist. It had never existed. The reactions ranged from stunned silence to explosive anger. These were wealthy people from the city who had been sold a bill of goods. A fantasy of a country lifestyle with city conveniences. Tom got sworn affidavits from all 5 of them. They detailed how Karen had explicitly, repeatedly promised them the use of my road, even pointing to it on maps during their tours as your scenic shortcut to town. We bundled these affidavits with everything else. Doc Evans' report on Daisy May, the certified receipts for the thousands of dollars in vet bills and property damage, the official reports from the baseless EPA and Health Department investigations showing a pattern of harassment, and the crown jewel, a thumb drive containing the crystal clear video of Karen Holloway in her white BMW X5, intentionally ramming and destroying my gate. We made 5 copies of the entire package. 1 for the district attorney's office, 1 for the state real estate commission, 1 for the local news station she'd lied to, 1 for us, and 1 extra, just in case. The Williamson County Fair was more than just a fair. It was the social and cultural center of our universe for 1 week a year. It's where deals were made, reputations were sealed, and the entire community came together. Everyone was there. Farmers, bankers, teachers, politicians, and, crucially, the local media who set up a broadcast booth right by the main entrance. Karen Holloway, ever the narcissist, couldn't resist the opportunity. Despite the humiliation of the wall and her wrecked car, she saw the fair as a chance to reclaim her narrative. She had a booth, a slick professional setup right in the main exposition hall. The estates at Willow Creek, luxury living naturally. She stood there in another power suit, a fixed, brittle smile on her face, handing out glossy brochures that I knew still promised the fraudulent access. She was trying to project an image of success, an unflappable confidence, like the wall and the lawsuit were just minor inconveniences. She was doubling down on her lie. On Saturday, the busiest day of the fair, Tom and I made our move. I was in my good boots and a clean shirt. Tom had on his lawyer suit, but he still had an unlit cigarillo tucked in the corner of his mouth. We carried a simple cardboard box filled with our document packages. We didn't head for her booth. We headed for the Channel 8 news tent. The same reporter who had done the sob story interview with her, a young guy named Chad, was doing a live segment about prize-winning pies. We waited patiently until he was off the air. "Mr. Chad," Tom said, his voice polite but firm. "I'm Tom Callahan, and this is my client Jake McCoy. You interviewed Miss Holloway about him last week. We believe you were given some incomplete information. We'd like to provide the other side of the story." Chad looked from me to Tom, a flicker of professional interest in his eyes. Reporters love a good follow-up, especially one with conflict. "What kind of information?" Tom placed one of our thick document packages on the table in front of him. "The kind that's backed up by county records, court orders, and sworn affidavits," he said. He tapped the folder. "In here, you'll find proof that the road Ms. Holloway claims is a public easement is, in fact, private property, confirmed by a court of law. You'll find proof that she has been using that fraudulent claim to sell real estate. That's called fraud. You'll also find evidence of a targeted harassment campaign against my client and a video of Ms. Holloway causing several $1,000s in property damage with her vehicle." Chad's eyes widened as he opened the folder and started flipping through the pages. He saw the official stamps, the legal letterheads. He got to the affidavits from the home buyers and let out a low whistle. This is big." "We've already delivered a copy to the district attorney," I said quietly. "The story isn't about a cranky rancher anymore. It's about a real estate agent committing felonies." Chad's journalistic instincts took over. The pie story was forgotten. This was real news. Would you be willing to go on camera? Right now?" "That's why we're here," I said. 5 minutes later, I was standing in front of the camera, a microphone clipped to my shirt. The bright lights were hot, but I felt ice-cold calm. The camera's red light came on. Chad introduced the segment as a major development in the story they'd covered last week. He turned to me. Mr. McCoy, you've just provided us with some explosive documents. Can you tell our viewers your side of this story? I looked straight into the lens, imagining I was talking to everyone in the county who had judged me based on her lies. I spoke calmly and clearly. I didn't raise my voice. I just stated the facts. I talked about my family's history on the land. I explained, with the documents in my hand, why the road was private. Then I moved on to her. This was never about a shortcut, I said. This was about fraud. Ms. Karen Halloway has been selling homes by illegally including my private property as a deeded amenity. She's been taking people's money based on a lie. When I secured my own property, she began a campaign of harassment. She filed false reports with the EPA and the health department. She slandered me on this very news station. And when all that failed, she tried to ram my gate with her car. As I was speaking, I saw movement over the reporter's shoulder. 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies were walking purposefully through the crowd in the exposition hall. They weren't strolling. They were heading somewhere specific. They were heading for the estates at Willow Creek booth. My lawyer, Tom, had timed it perfectly. He had called the DA's lead investigator as soon as we were on the air. The news camera, sensing the new development, swung away from me and zoomed in on Karen Halloway's booth. She was in the middle of charming a potential buyer, her back to the approaching deputies. One of them tapped her on the shoulder. She turned, her smile faltering as she saw the uniforms. "Can I help you, officers?" she asked, her voice still in sales mode. The lead deputy didn't mince words. His voice was flat and official, but it carried in the suddenly quiet hall. The crowd was turning to watch. The live news camera was capturing every second. "Karen Halloway, you're under arrest for multiple counts of felony real estate fraud and criminal mischief." The handcuffs clicked. The sound was like a gunshot in the cavernous hall. The color drained from her face, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The glossy brochures scattered across the floor at her feet. The cameras flashed. Her potential buyers backed away as if she were radioactive. The whole county, everyone she had tried to impress, everyone she had looked down on, was watching her utter and complete humiliation on live television. And I just stood there, off to the side, leaning against a display of prize-winning watermelons, smiling. Tom Callahan clapped me on the shoulder. "And that," he said, chewing on his unlit cigarillo, "is what we call service of process." The downfall was swift and total. With the public arrest at the fair, her house of cards didn't just fall, it was obliterated. The DA had an ironclad case. The video, the affidavits, her own sales contracts. It was an open and shut case of fraud. Her fancy city lawyer dropped her as soon as he realized her checks were going to bounce. The buyers she'd duped, now armed with the truth, all rescinded their contracts and filed a massive class action lawsuit against her and her brokerage. The State Real Estate Commission permanently revoked her license. Her ex-husband's lawyers, smelling blood in the water, moved in and seized what little assets she had left to cover the mountain of debt she'd been hiding. She was forced to declare bankruptcy, a humiliating public record of her failure. She eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence, but she still got 2 years in a state penitentiary. 2 years to think about how her arrogance and greed had led her from a luxury SUV to a prison jumpsuit. The estates at Willow Creek Development went bankrupt, the half-finished houses sitting like skeletons on the hill for a year before another. More reputable developer bought the land for pennies on the dollar and, notably, built a beautiful stone wall at their entrance, the one on the main road. Peace returned to the Broken Spur Ranch. It was a quiet that felt deeper and more profound than before. Daisy May recovered, though she walked with a slight limp, and against the odds, she gave birth to a healthy, strong bull calf in the spring. I named him Justice. Sometimes I walk down to the end of my property and just look at the wall. It stands there, silent and immense. It's a stark, grey monument, 100 feet of defiance. It cost me $52,000, a significant chunk of my life savings. But it bought me peace. It protected my family, my animals, and my legacy. It was a declaration that this land was mine, that my way of life had value, and that it was not for sale at any price. It was the best money I ever spent. They say good fences make good neighbors. That might be true for reasonable people. But sometimes when you're dealing with a true predator, a fence isn't enough. Sometimes you need a 12-foot concrete wall to make a felon. And that is how a $52,000 wall saved my ranch and sent a fraudster to jail. If you love seeing entitled nightmares get a dose of concrete justice, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories from the ranch. Have you ever had a neighbor from hell? Tell me in the comments below. I've got a feeling we could all share a story or two.